Hello my lovely bookish friends, and welcome back to another video. In this video I am going to show you my TBR list for this year. So I actually created this list back at the start of the year when, you know, it should be done. However, I then found it again recently and realised that I've only read like 3 books off this list so far. So now this is what originally was like my TBR list for, you know, 2020 is now my TBR list that I need to fit into these last months of 2020. So yeah, I've got a lot of reading I need to get done. These are all like books that I own as well, so there are also a lot of other books that I want to read. Quite a few books that I've been highly anticipated releases have come out as well, and then there's other books I want to get to because there's books I didn't even put on this list, such as, here it is, Secret History, because I didn't have this book at the time when I did this video. I found this in a charity shop for like 50p, bargain. And anyway, I really want to read this book. I've literally got so many books that I want to read. My TBR list is never ending. However, I officially put these ones down at the start of the year, so I kind of feel like I need to read at least some of them. So my plan is that by making this video, I'm sort of forcing myself to actually, you know, I've put it publicly out there now. These are the books that I want to read. So hopefully this means that I will crack on and actually kind of put these books first, because there's a lot of good ones on there. So let's take a look.
So the first book on my TBR is City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I'm really sorry if I mispronounced the name. I may butcher a few names in this. Apologies in advance. The book is part of a fantasy trilogy and follows the story of Nari, a young woman living in 18th century Cairo, and Ali, a young prince living in a Dijin city, as they struggle to stay alive and keep the ones they love protected and use their political power in responsible ways. Or at least that is the very basic synopsis that I managed to find on Google without getting spoilers. Now this is a book that I've actually wanted to read for a while, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know why I haven't read it yet, because I've heard so many good things about it. I think it might actually be because it's part of a trilogy and some of the later books look quite big and intimidating, so I think I've just not been more sort of committed to the idea of reading a trilogy recently, but I really want to try and get this book read this year because I've just heard so many good things about it and I want to see what all the hype is about. Right, so this next book has been on my TBR list for literally around 7 years. I think it's been that long because I've had this book, this physical book, since the TV show adaptation of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell came out, and I think that was done by the BBC in like 2015, something like that. And I watched the show, really liked it, and then said, oh, I'll read the book. But yeah, 7 or so years later, here we are, still on the list. So this book follows the story of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and it's set in this alternative history, this 19th century England around the time of the Neapolitan Wars, and it's this alternative history where magic once existed in England and these two men are trying to bring it back. They're trying to bring back magic to England, and that is the very basic premise of this book. Now, like I said, I really love the series. I do recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. It's really good, and the thing is, I've actually tried and started this book a number of times, but it has full pages of like footnotes that are just extra information that is not even directly relevant to the plot. It'll be literally like Mr. Norrell is talking about this book of magic, and then there'll be a big long footnote telling you about this made up book of magic, and it's great and it's really interesting, but it just means that there's quite a lot to read, and so I found it pretty difficult like the first few times I tried to read it. I feel like I might have to try and get the audiobook, so then I'm more like used to what I'm like going to be reading, so then in the future I'll be able to read it in the physical copy, perhaps. This is one that I really need to get read this year because 7 years is a long time to be on someone's TBR list. I'm sure have any of you got books that have been on your TBR list for years? If you have, please let me know in the comment section because I can't be alone in this. Okay? There's just books that they may be good, they just get put to the side and you never look at them again. Please let me know I'm not alone in this. Moving swiftly on, the next book is Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune. This book follows the story of Wallace Price, who dies, and when the Grim Reaper comes to collect him, rather than leading him directly to the afterlife, he takes him to this small village to this tea shop run by a man called Hugo. Now, Hugo is not just the tea shop's owner, but he's also a ferryman to souls who need to cross over. But Wallace isn't ready to abandon the life he's barely lived. With Hugo's help, he starts to learn all the things he missed in life. But when the manager, a curious and powerful being, arrives at the tea shop and gives Wallace 1 week to cross over, Wallace sets about living a lifetime in 7 days. Last year I read T.J. Klune's other book, The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I absolutely loved it. It's become one of my favourite books. It's just so wholesome and it's just so sweet and lovely. I highly recommend you all check it out. And so I may have treated myself to this special edition of that book, and it came in a set with this one as well. So I'm actually quite excited to check this book out, and I'm not quite sure why I haven't done it yet. I feel like I'm a little bit, not nervous, but because The House of the Cerulean Sea was so good, I'm sort of like, I sort of don't know if this one is going to have the same sort of feels as the other one. I mean, it's about sort of ghosts, I imagine, and sort of the dead, so I can't see it being, I feel like it's going to be sad at some points, but I'm excited to read it, so hopefully I'll try and get it done before the end of the year. Next up is Law by Alexandra Bracken, and this book came out last year, and when it came out there was quite a lot of hype about it, and I think that was part of the reason why I haven't read it. I kind of like waiting until after the hype dies for certain books, like when it's like not constantly in your face all the time, because otherwise I feel a bit intimidated by it. So I feel like that's the reason I haven't read this book yet. However, it does sound very much my cup of tea. It's a YA standalone, sort of urban fantasy, Greek myth. I was going to say, it's not a retelling, but I was sort of didn't know quite how to end that sentence. So it follows the story of Law and her friends as they struggle to survive in this deadly hunt where gods and humans alike are in constant mortal danger. After her family's murder by a rival bloodline, Law escapes and vows to repay her parents' sacrifice. 7 years later, Law comes home to find Athena gravely wounded on her doorstep. The goddess offers her an alliance, a chance to avenge her family. But will Law's decision to bind her fate to Athena's come back to haunt her? That is a very basic synopsis. Again, it was quite hard to work out how to do these synopsises, because I was sort of like, do I just read the blurb? But then the blurbs don't always sort of say what the book's about. I don't want spoilers, so researching this the TBR video was a lot of trying to avoid spoilers. But yeah, I'm quite excited for this one. I love sort of the Greek myth element, so I'm intrigued to see what it's like. Moving away from fantasy for a bit, this next book on my TBR is The Other Bennett Sister by Janice Hadlow. Now this follows the story of Mary Bennett from Pride and Prejudice, and from what I have been able to find out about this book, it takes place during Pride and Prejudice and then goes afterwards as well, following Mary's story and what was going on for her during the events of Pride and Prejudice and what happens to her later. Now, I don't know that much in terms of synopsis other than that, but this book has come to me with very high recommendations. A lot of people who I know who have read it say it is really good, so it's one of those ones that I really need to read this year, mainly because they want to talk to me about it. Also, I just think it's really interesting because Mary Bennett is one of those characters who's sort of in many ways a bit redundant in Pride and Prejudice. She doesn't actually turn up that much, and when she is there, she's more just a presence in the room rather than someone who has an active role in the whole story. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what her point of view is, and I have heard that this book is very well done. So yes, let's see if I can get that read this year. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get all of these done this year. We shall see. So the next book is probably the one that is highest on my TBR list, which is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now this is a book that is beloved by so many people. I see it literally everywhere. There's so much hype about this book, and I really do want to try and get this book read pretty soon because I want to see what all the fuss is about. Okay, so it follows the story of Patroclus, and it tells his side of the story to sort of the Achilles legends of Greek myth. That's kind of the basic thing I know about it. Now I know the legends of Achilles and obviously Achilles' heel, so I also know that this is a book that is going to like rip me apart a bit, which I'm sort of all up for. I'm both excited and slightly nervous to read this book. I kind of don't know what more to say about it because I don't really know what the rest of the kind of how the plot or anything unfolds, because obviously I haven't read it, and also not that I didn't want spoilers because I already know the myths, but I didn't want to research too much into this book, so because I kind of want to go in with it partially blind as to how this story is going to unfold for this version. So yeah, Song of Achilles. Let's see if I can get this read pretty soon. Sticking with the same author, we now have Cersei, and this is another Greek myth retelling, and it follows the story of Cersei, the daughter of Helios, the god of the sun. Despite her divinity, she is less beautiful and lacks the skills of her siblings, so she is largely shunned and ridiculed among the godly. When she falls in love with a mortal who, of course, is fated to age and die, she is desperate enough to experiment with a different, illicit type of power, potions and witchcraft, and with it she discovers her own ability to bend the world to her will. I'm really excited about this book because I actually don't know much about Cersei. I vaguely remember bits, but whereas with Achilles, I remember that kind of story clear enough, in terms of Cersei, I have practically no idea. So I'm really intrigued to read it, and I want to try and read both this and Song of Achilles quite close to each other because it's the same author, and I think it'd be quite a good... Maybe I could do a reading vlog on those two books. That'd be quite cool. So yeah, that was Cersei. The next book on this list is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Set in a war-torn world, it follows the story of Lena Starkov, an orphaned home soldier, and her best friend Mal. A sudden turn of events see Elena rising with extraordinary powers that could be the key to setting her homeland free from a dark entity called the Fold, filled with monstrous creatures called the Volcra. Now that's a very basic synopsis. Now I'm going to admit, I have seen the TV series, the Netflix series of Shadow and Bone, and to be perfectly honest, I was only interested in the Six of Crows characters, and I thought that the Darkling was creepy, and even though, Ben Barnes was great, I just thought he was so creepy from the beginning, so I really didn't get the whole Darkling and Elena thing that went on. But I know that it's quite different in the book to it is in the show for some bits, so I don't know. This is one that, because I really loved Six of Crows and I love the Six of Crow characters, and because I wasn't particularly interested in the show, apart from Mal was great, but I know his book version isn't quite the same, so I don't really know how I feel towards this series, but I do want to read it probably before the next series comes out, just so I know kind of a bit more about, the world, and also just to see what the original material is like to the show. Up next is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This is a YA duology, and it follows the story of Maya, who dreams of becoming a great tailor but can't because she is a girl. However, when a royal messenger summons her ailing father to court, she disguises as a man and goes in his place to compete for the position of imperial tailor to the emperor. If she's found out, she'll die. But nothing prepared her for the challenges ahead, to sew 3 magic gowns for the emperor's bride-to-be. So from what I've gathered about this book, it's sort of like Mulan, but with, magic tailoring and stuff like that. And that's kind of all I know from it. I feel like there's probably a lot more to the duology than that. But yeah, I really want to check it out. I think it's very much my cup of tea in terms of setting and the fact that it is a duology, because I'm really into those at the moment. So I think it's very much my cup of tea. I really want to check this out. I also want to check out some of the other works by this author. She also wrote the Six Crimson Cranes duology, which I believe has just finished, or will be by the time this book is released, the second book will be out. So yeah, I kind of want to try and check out both of those duologies this year if possible. Okay, so this next book is once again a change in genre. This is an autobiography, and it's one that has been on my list for a very long time. It is Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. And I have actually read half of this book, but then I haven't actually finished it. So my aim is to try and finish the rest this year, because I can't remember when I don't actually remember when I read the first part, but I got to like midway through and then I put it down and started reading some fantasy or something, and then just haven't gone back to it. Even though it's actually not that difficult of a read, it's just that autobiographies aren't really always my cup of tea. However, I do really want to read this one. So basically, it follows the story of Nelson Mandela's life from childhood through to his long walk to freedom, as the title suggests. And it's just one of those books I feel like probably everyone should read at some point. So I just want to try and finish the rest of it. Now I'll just apologise in advance because I feel like I'm going to butcher some names here. I have tried to practice these, but I can't speak Chinese, so apologies. So this next book is The Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. Now, if any of you, like me, love Chinese dramas and Chinese films, then you will know that this is the English translation book version of the TV series The Untamed, which was a massive hit Chinese drama a few years back. It was huge and just brilliant. So this story follows Wei Wuxian, who was once a feared and powerful cultivator who was killed when the martial arts world turned against him. Years later, his soul is resurrected in another man's body, so he's brought back to life, but in a different body with a different face and all that. However, though granted a second life, he is not free from his first. Yet this time he won't face it alone, with the esteemed Wang Wangji by his side. I'm so sorry, I really messed that up. But together they will seek to shine light on the dark truths from the past. So I'm going to apologise again, I've really butchered all those names. But yes, so I love The Untamed, the TV show, and I really wanted to read these books now that they've been translated. Especially because, so in case anyone who is interested in this book is actually a boys' love novel set in the martial arts world, but in China, obviously gay characters are not allowed on TV, so they had to take all the elements out when they did the TV series. So it was very kind of not even that subtly hinted at, but they had to take all that out. So I'm quite intrigued to see how the actual events turn out in the book with these elements put back in. So yeah, I'm really excited to read this one. I feel like I'm just going to end up binge reading them all. Once I start reading them, I think it's literally just going to be a binge of however many is out at the time. Okay, so next up we return to YA duologies, this time with Braybearer, which follows the story of Cersei, a young girl bound by a magical wish by her absent and distant lover to kill the Crown Prince. When Cersei is sent to the capital to compete as part of the Crown Prince's council, Cersei finds that what she has always craved: love, belonging, and connection. Torn between her genuine love for the Crown Prince and a magic that compels her to fulfill the wish, Cersei must fight the destiny laid out for her, or succumb to being a pawn and destroying everything she has grown to love. So I've actually heard a lot of good things about this duology, and I think it's also going to be a Netflix show. I'm sure I've heard rumours about that somewhere. So I'm intrigued to read it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but to be perfectly honest, I also don't know that much about it other than what I've just read in this very, brief sort of synopsis. So I have no idea really what I'm getting myself into, but yeah, I am intrigued to check it out at some point. Okay, we're on to our final two books. This next one is the E Schwabs, A Darker Shade of Magic. Now, I was getting really confused by a load of the synopsises I was looking up, and then I was getting spoilers, so I'm just going to read you the blurb for this one. Cal is one of the last travellers, magicians with rare ability to travel between parallel universes connected by one magical city. There's Grey London, without magic, ruled by the Mad King George III. Red London, where magic is revered and where Cal is raised among the heir to the Empire. White London, where people fight to control the remaining magic and the magic fights back. And once there was Black London. So I have absolutely no idea what this book is about. I noticed that there's quite a lot of love for it and that it's fantasy based. It's part of a trilogy, and yeah, that's literally it. So I'm really intrigued to check it out because I'm going into it pretty much blind. But yeah, if you have read this book and can give like a non-spoilery brief synopsis in the comments, I would, quite appreciate it, because I've got literally no idea what's going on. That would be really appreciated, and just let me know if you recommend it or not. Okay, now let us move on to the final book. This final book is How Do You Live? And this book is actually going to be the next Studio Ghibli movie, because it's one of Miyazaki's favourite childhood books, and it literally brought him out of retirement to make the movie for it. For this one, I am once again just going to read the blurb to you. The streets of Tokyo swarm below 15-year-old Copper as he gazes out into the city of his childhood. Struck by the thought of the infinite people whose lives play out alongside his own, he begins to wonder, how do you live? Considering life's biggest questions for the first time, Copper turns to his dear uncle for heartwarming wisdom. As the old man guides the boy on a journey of philosophical discovery, a timeless tale unfolds, offering a poignant reflection on what it means to be human. Now, this book just sounds like it's going to be very wholesome, and honestly, I just really want to read it because it's going to be the next Studio Ghibli movie. That is the main reason that I know of this book and why I really want to get this book read, because I really love Studio Ghibli. I love so many of their movies, so I'm really want to get this read and see what it's like.
So that is my TBR list for the rest of 2022, but as I said, there are a lot more books that I also want that could be added into it. Hopefully I'll be able to read a few more than 3, as it currently stands, of them. I mean, to be fair, all the ones that I've read so far, those great 3, have all been really good. So I really want to get the rest read, because I know that Song of Achilles is a really beloved book by many. I know that Cersei is really well liked, and also City of Brass. There's lots on there that I know lots of people really like, and I think I will like as well. However, I just, for one reason or another, put them off. So this video's been made. Let us see by the time we get to the end of the year how many of these I have actually read. And that brings us to the end of this video. Let me know what books are on your TBR list for the rest of the year. Have you managed to complete and tick off books that you put on your list at the start of the year, or are you like me, still got loads left and loads more to add in? I really want to know what people want to read. So yes, leave a comment, and if you want more bookish content, then please like and subscribe, because we have a lot more to come. And until next time, my lovely bookish friends, see you later.